My name is Uma, and OCD makes me ask tormenting what-if questions all day, every day about the things most important to me. My first memory with OCD was when I was 4 years old, and I developed a belief that if I didn't do all of my prayers 39 times at night, my mom would not come home from work alive. So I would sit in the bathroom and do 12 prayers 39 times each to make sure that she came home alive every night. OCD has always impacted my life for as long as I can remember. It has been something that caused me to constantly doubt everything around me, whether that was in school and doubting that I actually understood things, or doubting that I could actually follow directions correctly or remember things, take tests. It really affected me when I started going through early childhood trauma and doubting that the actual traumas actually happened and that I was actually right in any scenario. It started affecting me even more so when I started being unable to do normal things that other human beings could do properly, like being able to go shop at the grocery store and not be fixated for 8 hours on making the right choices and saving as much money as possible. OCD has affected me for my whole life by taking over and robbing me of my sense of security, my sense of peace, my ability to function in the world with any modicum of certainty, of any way, shape, or form of feeling like I could trust myself. And it is a fear that is oftentimes so overwhelming and really just feels like it's strangling me sometimes. That's what it's felt like for most of my life. My journey of getting diagnosed with OCD and finally engaging in evidence-based treatment was quite a long one, which unfortunately is so common amongst OCD survivors like myself. So I started exhibiting symptoms as early as 3 or 4 years old, who knows, maybe even earlier, and I was finally diagnosed with what I call the general mental health conditions, with major depressive disorder, suicidality, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder around 12 or 13 years old. I was also coming out of childhood traumas that were not yet diagnosed or identified, but OCD was not identified within me until finally when I was 22 years old. And it came from myself because I finally started realizing that I had physical compulsions that I could at the time not live without. And I really was able to notice them and realize that there was something different about me in relativity to other people around me without OCD, because I started finally living with my partner, who's now my husband, and I noticed the vast difference in the way I navigated life and how my compulsions affected his life. So after all of this and self-identifying with obsessive compulsive symptoms, I brought all of this information to the general psychologist I was seeing at the time at 22, and I was diagnosed with OCD. But unfortunately, that psychologist was not trained in OCD and treatment, so the psychologist only identified my outward compulsions, my external compulsions, and started conducting traditional cognitive behavioral therapy on me, as well as psychodynamic therapy, which unfortunately I found out later did not work for me, and it did not address the mental compulsions that were still running extremely pervasively. So I went about 3 more years from 22 to 25 going through treatment that was not working for me, and I had been white-knuckling through life thinking that OCD treatment was just white-knuckling and trying really hard not to do my external compulsions. From the power of the internet and social media, I finally learned about what true, real OCD actually is, that there are actual therapists and psychologists and medical workers who are specializing in OCD treatment and conducting exposure and response prevention therapy, which is the gold standard of OCD treatment. I finally started seeking out therapy from an ERP provider, and that has been so monumentally life-changing for me. Some of the what-ifs that really still consume my life right now that I'm really working on in treatment are: what if I am a bad person? What if I am lying? What if I am an imposter? What if I'm a fake? What if I cannot remember? And so much of those have to do with a lot of trauma and traumatic events that I have gone through in my life that I did not experience validation and understanding in. So my brain really latched on to those events, and my brain's way of coping with it is to constantly doubt if they actually happened because it feels like it's too much. OCD also really latches onto my sense of self currently, my sense of spirituality, my sense of being able to believe in anything anymore. I lived through being in a religious cult for 7 years, and so OCD really latches onto my ability to trust any sense of a higher power, any sense of belief in good of other people. It really latches onto the feeling of unsafety and the feeling that people will take advantage of me again. I also really struggle with what if I made a mistake, because I am utterly fearful of making a mistake in any aspect of my life, although I know that nobody's perfect logically. I am also a neuroscientist and a neuroscience researcher, and it has taken a long time for me to be able to function well in school, and I'm doing relatively really well, but how OCD and what ifs affect me in that scenario is that neuroscience feels like a very personal journey for me because I'm so invested in helping other people with the things that I go through myself. And because of the high stakes and because of the fact that OCD latches onto what you really care about, I really care about my research. I really care about the laboratory work that I do. And so now something I really struggle with is when I'm conducting experiments, when I'm going through protocols for research, when I'm following very rigid rules about how to do things, OCD really latches onto, did I actually do it correctly? Did I actually conduct the experiment right? Something that I want people to know about OCD is, from my personal life experience, I've navigated many things that people might deem challenging, many things that people often deem more challenging than OCD. I live with cancer. I have lived through 4 autoimmune diseases. I have other mental illnesses. I have lived through sexual abuse. I've lived through being in a cult. I've lived through failing out of school. I've lived through physical abuse, mental abuse. I've lived through a lot of things. And what I find when sharing those things is people understand the struggle. People might not have lived through them themselves, but people respect and understand that there is a healing process, that it is something that's not linear and something that can be debilitating. But when I share that I have OCD, I am often met with not the same experience. I'm met with condescension oftentimes. I've met with a confusion of why OCD matters, because people interpret OCD as someone who loves doing things perfectly, someone who loves organization, someone who loves things a certain way. And so it's often met with laughter. And what I want people to know is that of the things that I have lived through, OCD is probably the most debilitating thing I live with, if not in the top 3. And OCD overlays so many of the other traumatic events I live with because OCD has me doubting what if any of those things ever happened. OCD has me doubting it so much that sometimes I'm unable to engage in or seek treatment for the other things that I actually live with as well. But also OCD is so treatable when people understand what it actually is and are able to get the treatment that they need. So it is so important for OCD to start being understood for what it actually is, so that people who have OCD, people who have the symptoms of OCD, can seek treatment earlier, can get help, and they can improve their lives. People don't need to suffer, but it takes so many of us to be honest about our experiences and to raise awareness for what OCD actually is. So if you have OCD, please just know that you're not alone, that you're so valid. It does not need to show up in the ways that are common or that are portrayed in the media. You're able to seek treatment. You're not alone. It is scary. It is stigmatized, but you are so safe and you are so valid. You are so valid. To me, hope in the context of OCD doesn't necessarily mean being cured, because I am learning to sit in the uncertainty of maybe I will get better and maybe I won't. But what hope does mean for me is being able to use my experience to help other people potentially not suffer as much, and particularly people in the South Asian community like myself, because mental health is already stigmatized. It's already not as understood as it could be. It still has a long way to go in being accepted and treated in the way that it should be. But in the South Asian community particularly, in the Western world, it's even more so understood, it's even more so underrepresented, and it's even more so untreated. And so for me, hope involves people who have disorders like OCD being able to access treatment and understanding, and understand that they are valid in seeking help for OCD. Hope for me means that people actually start learning that mental health matters, and mental health is health. Mental health and physical health are two sides of the same coin. Our brain is another organ in our bodies, just like everything else, and it deserves the same amount of care as any other illness you may have. New research for OCD is so incredibly important for so many reasons. OCD has come such a long way in being understood, but there's also so much more to be understood about how OCD works in the brain. So we need people in the fields of neuroscience, in psychology, in medical biology, in every field imaginable to want to study OCD more, because the more we know about it, the more we can help other people. OCD can be so treated if we understand the different aspects of what is going on. We understand some and we're treating some, but there are so many people who still need other forms of treatment and who are not responding fully to the treatments we have available. So any and all innovations in the field are just so incredibly important. As a neuroscientist, I also personally think that research into the mental compulsions and mental ritual side of OCD is so incredibly important, because as we look at the treatment efficacy for so many different aspects of OCD, while it is so amazing that they can treat a great number of people who have OCD, it is nowhere near 100%. Because of OCD, my brain loves to throw scary what-if questions at me every single day. But what if you're not alone? And what if research brings hope?